Marisol, a worn-out waitress, hands Javier, a soaked boy in the rain, a warm meal, unaware he's the heir to Victor Salazar, a billionaire titan. From this small deed surges a fearless climb. She tackles betrayal, tears apart a cutthroat plot, and seizes control to transform Salazar's dynasty, showing one bite can fuel a wave of guts and change. Hey there, you wanderers of the heart. Welcome to Tales of Kindness. Around here, we spin yarns where the little things, like a warm meal in the pouring rain, spark revolutions. Take Marisol's journey. One soggy night, one determined kid, and a run-in with a billionaire's cold world that might just melt. Every story here's got soul, guts, and that spark that stays with you. So subscribe to catch the magic. Tap the bell so you're first in line, and drop your own kindness stories in the comments. We're all part of this. Let's make waves one tale at a time. The young Latina server had dedicated years to working double shifts at a modest cafe, earning barely enough to survive, yet she never allowed weariness to diminish her empathy. When she noticed a slight boy in a wheelchair trembling in the drizzle outside, she acted without hesitation. She brought him inside, provided him with food, and ensured he felt protected. Across the street, a wealthy tycoon observed their interaction closely. That tycoon was the boy's father, and her unassuming act of goodwill was about to unlock possibilities she had never envisioned. Rain fell in unrelenting streams. It pounded against the pavement of Crescent Street, turning the worn sidewalk into a treacherous, slick surface. Streetlights glowed faintly, casting dim light over the aged buildings lining the road. It was well past closing time, nearly midnight, but Marisol Vega wasn't the type to turn away someone in need, not when they were hurting, not when life had already dealt them enough hardship. She was wiping down the counter, her olive skin glistening with perspiration after an exhausting 12-hour shift, when she caught sight of him. The boy sat hunched in a weathered wheelchair just outside, his dark hair matted against his brow, a threadbare jacket offering little defense against the cold. He lingered beyond the cafe's flickering neon sign, clutching a tattered blanket that failed to shield him from the damp chill. Marisol frowned, set her cloth aside, and pushed open the door, wincing as the wind struck her. "Hey, little one," she called softly, kneeling beside him. "What are you doing out here by yourself?" The boy tensed at first, then lifted his head. Then his green eyes met hers, wide, wary, searching. "I'm waiting for my dad," he whispered, his voice nearly lost in the rain's steady rhythm. Marisol scanned the empty street. No one was in sight, only the faint glimmer of a pawn shop's quick cash sign blinking in the distance and the sound of tires cutting through puddles. "Where is he?" she asked, concern threading her tone. The boy shrugged, pulling the blanket closer. Marisol sighed, chewing her lip. She'd witnessed too many nights like this, too many children left waiting for someone who might not show. "You can't stay out here in this weather," she said, offering a gentle smile. "Come inside with me, all right? It's warm, and I've got something good for you." He hesitated briefly, but then gave a small nod. Marisol gripped the wheelchair's handles and guided him into the cafe. The warmth enveloped them instantly, the aroma of fresh bread and strong coffee wrapping around them like a comfort. She settled him at a table near the heater, draping a clean towel over his shoulders before kneeling to meet his gaze. "I'm Marisol," she said with a warm grin. "What's your name, pequeño?" he sniffed, fingers tightening around the blanket's edge. "Javier." Marisol nodded approvingly. "That's a fine name. Are you hungry?" He gave a shy nod. She didn't wait for more. She moved to the kitchen, retrieving a fresh roll, slicing it deftly. Soon she placed a warm plate before him, a toasted sandwich, golden and melty, paired with a cup of vegetable soup, her standby remedy for rough days. Her abuela had made it for her on nights when the world felt too heavy, too unkind. "This one's on me," she said, tucking a napkin under his chin. Javier's eyes widened as he took a bite, the cheese pulling in sticky strands. "This is amazing," he murmured, awe softening his voice. Marisol smiled, watching him eat eagerly. "Good food fixes a lot," she said lightly, though a familiar pang stirred within her, the ache of seeing someone so young already burdened by too much. Unbeknownst to her, someone watched from across the street. A sleek silver Mercedes idled in the shadows, its dark windows mirroring the cafe's neon glow. Inside sat Victor Salazar, his piercing hazel eyes fixed on the scene. At 48, Victor had forged his fortune through discipline, calculation, and an unflinching edge. Salazar Enterprises dominated Charlotte's tech landscape, a billion-dollar operation, built on precision, not softness. Victor, its CEO, had spent decades ensuring no one, no feeling, no vulnerability could disrupt his control. Yet now he sat motionless, observing. Javier was his son, and this woman, this Latina server in a faded apron at a humble cafe, was feeding him without charge. Victor's jaw clenched. He'd been held up by a last-minute call, a crisis with his European partners, and had told Javier to wait near the cafe for just a short while. He hadn't anticipated this. He reached for his phone and dialed swiftly. "Elena," he said when his assistant answered, "head to the Crescent Café. No formal attire, no fuss. Be there in 15 minutes. A pause lingered. "Sir." Victor's grip on the phone hardened. "Learn everything you can about the woman who just fed my son." He ended the call. Inside the cafe, Javier laughed for the first time that evening, kicking his legs under the table, soup smudged on his chin. Marisol wiped it away with a napkin, chuckling. "Messy eater, huh?" Across the street, Victor watched, his face a mask, his mind already turning. Marisol brushed her hands on her apron, glancing at the cafe window as rain streaked the glass in uneven lines. Javier finished his sandwich, his hands now warm, no longer shaking. The taut, guarded look he'd worn, a look no child his age should carry, had eased. A quiet pride swelled in her chest. One more person helped, one more small kindness given. Then the door swung open. A gust of cold air rushed in, followed by a woman in a plain jacket and sneakers, her dark hair pulled into a loose bun. She didn't fit the cafe's usual crowd, not because of her clothes, but because of her deliberate, measured presence. Marisol had served long enough to spot someone who wasn't there for a meal. The woman's eyes found Javier instantly. She softened her demeanor, kneeling beside him. "Hey, buddy, time to head out," she said smoothly, though her tone felt too polished, too careful. Javier frowned, wiping his mouth with the napkin Marisol had given him. "But I haven't finished my water." The woman, Elena, though Marisol didn't know her name, tilted her head with a practiced smile. "You can bring it along. Your ride's ready." Marisol's instincts sharpened. She'd seen too many people brushed aside, too many moments dismissed without question, but she never stayed silent. She crossed her arms, studying the woman closely. "You know him?" The woman's smile held steady, but her stance stiffened slightly, a flicker of unease passing through her. "Yes," she replied evenly. "I'm his aunt." Marisol didn't flinch. She turned to Javier. "That true, pequeño?" Javier hesitated, a beat too long. Elena's jaw tightened. Marisol knew that pause. She'd grown up in a world where a second's doubt could mean everything, where fear and authority moved quietly. She knelt beside Javier, meeting his uncertain eyes. "You okay, honey?" she asked, her voice a gentle shield. "You want to go with her?" Javier glanced between them, his small hands crumpling the napkin, knuckles paling. "She's here for my dad," he mumbled. "I guess I have to." Marisol held her ground. Her gut urged her to dig deeper, to demand more, to ensure this boy was truly safe. But she'd been here before, a Latina pushing too hard, asking too much, drawing the wrong eyes. Still, she wouldn't let him leave empty-handed. She stepped to the counter, grabbed a wrapped oatmeal cookie, and pressed it into Javier's hand. "For the road," she said. His fingers closed around it and a faint smile broke through. "Thanks, Marisol. You're the best." Her smile felt forced, a knot twisting in her chest. She watched Elena wheel Javier toward the door, the air between them heavy with unspoken tension. Just before stepping into the rain, Elena glanced back, not speaking, just looking. Marisol recognized it, a quiet warning. Across the street, the Mercedes headlights flared. As Elena approached, the back door opened without a signal, and Victor emerged, his tall frame silhouetted against the cafe's neon light. Once Javier was secured in the back seat, Victor turned to Elena. "Well?" Elena exhaled, adjusting her jacket. "She's perceptive. Didn't buy the aunt line, nearly called me out." Victor's expression remained stone, but she let him go. "She didn't have a choice," Elena said pointedly. "You know how it works. A Latina causing trouble. She'd be the one paying for it." Victor's jaw shifted, but he stayed silent. Elena crossed her arms. "She's different." Victor already knew that. He'd seen it the moment Marisol stepped into the rain without a second thought. The way she'd spoken to Javier, like he was worth something, not a burden. He'd watched people grovel and scheme for his wealth, but she hadn't even known Javier was his, and still helped. That made her unpredictable. He opened the car door and slid inside. "I want everything on her," he said, his voice low, buckling his seatbelt. "Name, address, history. On my desk by dawn." Elena paused, then nodded. "Understood." The Mercedes pulled away, the cafe shrinking in the mirror. Victor's thoughts weren't on the city or the road. They were on Marisol Vega and the obligation he now carried. That night Marisol trudged home, her shoes soaked, the cold seeping into her bones. The cafe's meager tip sat light in her pocket. Hardly enough for rent, let alone food. But Javier's smile lingered in her mind. Still, something gnawed at her, an unease crawling under her skin. That woman's rehearsed smile. Javier's hesitation. It wasn't just a stranger picking up a kid. It was someone with a purpose. She climbed the steps to her cramped apartment on Pinewood Avenue, where the heater sputtered and the walls let every neighbor's noise bleed through. Closing the door, she leaned against it, rubbing her face. She'd learned long ago to mind her own business, but this felt off. A knock jolted her. No one visited this late. Peering through the peephole, her stomach dropped. A man stood there, tall, imposing, in a sleek black coat that screamed money. His sharp features and hazel eyes dissected her before she even opened the door. She didn't. "Who is it?" A pause, then a deep, measured voice. "Victor Salazar." The name meant nothing to her. "What do you want?" she asked, hand on the lock. Another pause. To talk. Her instincts screamed no, but curiosity won. She cracked the door, meeting his gaze. He didn't belong here. Not in her building, her neighborhood, her life. "I don't know you," she said flatly. His face didn't shift. "No, but you know my son." Her pulse quickened. She studied him now, the way he filled the doorway, his coat damp, but his boots pristine. This was wealth, power, the kind that could crush without effort. Her grip tightened on the frame. "Javier," she said slowly, "you're his father." A faint nod. "I was across the street last night." The chill in her deepened. "Watching." "I was." She exhaled sharply. "So what? Here to criticize me for feeding your kid?" "No," Victor said, his gaze unreadable. "I'm here because I don't believe in handouts. I believe in settling debts." Before she could respond, he drew an envelope from his coat and set it on her wobbly table. She didn't move, eyeing it. Thick, heavy, the kind of paper that carried weight. "What's that?" she asked, swallowing. "A job offer." Her mind stalled. She blinked up at him. "What?" Victor tilted his head, as if measuring her worth. "A position at Salazar Enterprises, 6 figures, full benefits." She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You think I'd work for some rich guy who thinks a paycheck squares us up?" He didn't react. "I don't think you want pity, Marisol. That's why I'm not offering it." Her name in his voice tightened something in her chest. She crossed her arms. "You don't know me. I know enough, he said, steady as stone. I know you fed my son without expecting a reward. I know you didn't see him as a nuisance. That's uncommon. Her throat tightened, his words prying at something raw. She glanced at the envelope, its presence absurd on her table. What would I even do at Salazar Enterprises? Pour your coffee? A flicker of something, amusement, crossed his face, then vanished. No, you'd work with me. Negotiations, outreach. You're good with people. I need that. She scoffed. You don't need me. You've got a company of elite grads who'd claw each other for that job. His expression hardened slightly. That's why I don't trust them. Silence hung between them, thick and pressing. She felt his offer coil around her pride, her fatigue, her refusal to be owned. 6 figures meant no more scrambling for rent, no more stretching every dollar. But her mother's voice echoed, Never owe them anything, Mija. They don't give without taking. Her jaw locked. Why me? He held her stare, and for a moment something shifted in his eyes. Because you saw my son, he said, voice quieter, almost strained. Not my wealth, not my name. You saw him. Her chest squeezed. She looked at the envelope once more, then lifted it slowly. I'll consider it, she murmured. Victor watched her a moment longer, then nodded curtly. Good. He left without another word. She stood there, the envelope heavy in her hands, knowing she wasn't just considering. She'd say yes. Her first day at Salazar Enterprises felt like entering a different realm. The gleaming glass tower smelled of wealth and polish, the air thick with influence. Marisol stepped into the lobby in a second-hand blazer and worn heels, every gaze turning to weigh her. It wasn't curiosity, it was judgment. She kept her chin up. She'd faced underestimation before. She knew how to stand firm. Victor waited in his office, a vast space with towering windows over the city, a desk so flawless it seemed ornamental. He didn't look up as she entered, just pointed to a chair. You're late. She raised an eyebrow, sitting. By 3 minutes. He met her eyes, hazel and cutting. 3 minutes, I don't recover. She sighed, shaking her head, barely a moment in, and he was already testing her. You want me here or not? He leaned back, assessing her. We'll see. Before she could retort, the door opened. Elena stepped in, tablet in hand, her face neutral. Marisol caught the quick, appraising glance, like Elena had already decided she didn't belong. Miss Vega, Elena said smoothly, welcome to Salazar Enterprises. Marisol met her stare with a slow smile. Good to see you too, Miss Torres. A flicker passed through Elena's eyes before she turned to Victor. I've prepped the files for the Lennox Group talks. She handed him the tablet, barely glancing at Marisol. Should I brief her on procedures? No, Victor said, eyes on the screen. I will. Marisol wasn't sure if that was a blessing or a curse. Elena nodded but paused at the door, glancing back. Good luck, she said, her tone more warning than warmth. Marisol tilted her head, but Victor was already moving on. No pleasantries, no easing in. He slid a folder across the desk. Lennox Group, he said. They want a deal to shift production abroad, cut costs. It'll gut thousands of jobs here. She skimmed the pages, stomach twisting. And you want me to, what, talk them out of it? His gaze didn't falter. I want you to do what you're good at. Read people. She leaned back, arms crossed. So you think I can sweet-talk billionaires into caring? He didn't blink. No, I think you know something they don't. She narrowed her eyes. Which is? He leaned forward slightly. That people with nothing left to lose fight the hardest. The words struck deep, resonating silently. She stared at him, then exhaled. You're cryptic for a tech mogul. His mouth twitched, almost a smile, but gone fast. Meetings at noon, he said, standing. Don't be late. She rolled her eyes, but held her tongue. She had work to do. The conference room felt sterile, all metal and glass, designed to unsettle. Marisol sat beside Victor, facing three men in crisp suits, each exuding the assurance of those who could trade lives with a signature. The leader, Harold Grayson, 62, with silver hair swept back like privilege was his inheritance, barely acknowledged her. She'd met his type before, men who only valued their own mirror image. She stayed composed. Victor started, direct as ever. You want to relocate production to Vietnam. You claim efficiency. I say it dismantles a workforce that sustained this company for years. Grayson offered a thin, cold smile. You're mistaken, Victor. It's not personal. It's economics. Marisol's hands tightened under the table. Not personal. She'd heard that too often. When her rent spiked because of gentrification, when her father's factory job vanished to cheaper shores, when firms like this erased towns and called it progress. She smiled, sharp-edged. Funny, she said, tilting her head. It's always economics until it's your paycheck. Grayson's eyes flicked to her, finally. Victor stayed silent, watching. Grayson exhaled, dismissive. And you are? She didn't waver. Marisol Vega, Salazar Enterprises. He sized her up, then discarded her in a glance. She didn't care. She'd been overlooked before. He waved a hand. Look, miss, I understand. You see us as the bad guys. But this is about numbers, what's rational. Miss. Her jaw tightened. She leaned forward, mirroring him. All right. Let's talk numbers. She slid a report across the table. Here's what happens when you move production. Short-term savings, sure, but in 5 years, when overseas costs climb, you'll bleed millions rebuilding, rehiring, and dodging the fallout when the news screams, jobs sold out. She tapped the paper. That's not a hunch, that's data. Grayson eyed the report but didn't touch it. She held his stare, unflinching. You can choose wisely now, she said, voice steady, or explain to your shareholders why your quick win tanked their future. Silence. Then Grayson sighed, lifted the report, scanned it. Victor didn't smile, but the room shifted. She felt it. She'd turned the tide. Grayson set the paper down, unreadable. We'll reconsider. Victor nodded. Do that. The meeting wrapped soon after. As Grayson and his team left, Victor's gaze settled on her. Well, he asked. She turned to him. He studied her, then said, I hired you for a reason. She smirked. Damn right you did. For the first time at Salazar Enterprises, she felt she belonged. 2 months later, Marisol had found her footing, or thought she had. She'd learned to navigate power's corridors, to hold her own in a world that rarely saw her. She'd faced Grayson and won, proving to Victor and herself she wasn't a token hire. She belonged. But triumphs at the top were fleeting. Now, the company was in crisis, Marisol was in the crosshairs, and someone had framed her to fall. She'd just returned from a client meeting when Elena intercepted her in the hall. We've got trouble, she said, voice clipped. Marisol frowned. Define trouble. Elena handed her a printed email without a word. Marisol's stomach plummeted. It was a leaked company report, sensitive financials, sent to the press with her name on the forward. The text blurred as the air thickened. She forced a breath. This isn't mine. I know, Elena said, but someone wants it to be. Her pulse pounded. She'd been in enough tight spots to know how fast they unraveled. A Latina in a white, wealthy space didn't get doubt's benefit. She was guilty the moment they pointed. She gripped the paper, scanning again. Who's seen this? Victor, Eleanor said, and the board. Her breath caught. The board. She'd barely carved her place here, and now they'd yank it away. Victor's office felt colder than ever, or maybe it was his stare, hands folded on his desk, eyes dissecting her. Tell me I didn't misjudge you, he said, voice low. She slammed the email down. This isn't me, Victor. He didn't glance at it. I want to believe that, he said evenly, but this is a major breach. Millions at risk, stocks dropping, inquiries. You see the stakes. She leaned forward, hands on his desk. I see it. I also see someone picked me because I'm the easy mark, the outsider, the Latina with too much nerve. Who'd trust me over a veteran exec? He didn't flinch or deny it. The silence stretched. Her nails bit into her palms. Do you think I did this? He held her gaze. No. Relief broke through, but he added, the board does. She cursed, pacing. The trap tightened. So what now? She demanded. He exhaled, rubbing his jaw. We find the real source. She stopped. We? Not just you, not just me. We. For the first time, the ice in her chest thawed. He stood, shrugging on his jacket. Elena's tracing the email. It's from an outside server. Someone hid their tracks well. We'll outsmart them. She crossed her arms, meeting his look. And if we're too late? If the board cuts me? His jaw hardened. Then we make them regret it. She studied him. Victor Salazar didn't toss promises lightly, but she trusted him now. Whoever framed her had just ignited a war. The truth unraveled quickly. Marisol and Elena worked overnight, sifting server logs, chasing digital trails. The culprit was meticulous but not flawless. The leak traced to a shadow account linked to Paul Kendrick, a decade-long exec with a knack for staying clean while others took the hit. By morning, they had enough to ruin him. Marisol marched into the boardroom before they could summon her, the air thick with suspicion. Polished suits stared her down. Assuming she was done, Victor sat at the head, unreadable. Miss Vega, an older board member with a smug grin, nodded to a chair. I assume you know why you're here. She didn't sit. I do, she said, voice firm, and I assume you know you're about to make a costly error. A hint of amusement flickered on Victor's face, but he stayed silent. The board member began, Miss Vega. She cut in. I was the obvious scapegoat, right? The new hire, the outsider. Pin it on me and move on. She dropped a thick file on the table. Except you chose wrong. She pushed it forward. Quiet stretched as they skimmed, smugness fading to unease. Paul Kendrick, 2 seats away, paled. These are traced emails, she said. Payments, calls to journalists, all tied to Kendrick, not me. She crossed her arms. Legal has copies. So does the press. Want to talk damage control? Start there. Murmurs rippled. Kendrick leapt up, voice shrill. This is absurd. She's lying. She turned to Victor, brow raised. Am I? Victor's voice sliced through. No, she's not. Kendrick's mouth shut. Victor stood, adjusting his cuffs. Paul Kendrick is fired, effective now. Legal action follows. He scanned the room. Anyone else want to test this game? Consider this your notice. Silence reigned. Marisol didn't smile. She didn't need to. She'd won. 2 weeks later, she stood with Victor at Javier's graduation. The boy beamed from his wheelchair, diploma in hand like a treasure. Told you I'd do it, he said, chest out. She laughed, tousling his hair. Never doubted you. Victor watched. His usual reserve softened. You did well, Vega, he said. She smirked. Damn right I did. Javier grinned. Are you two gonna hug? Victor sighed. No. She rolled her eyes. Never. Javier laughed. For once, Marisol felt she'd built something lasting, and she wasn't finished. Years later, Marisol Vega sat in Salazar Enterprises' executive suite, her name etched on the door as Vice President of Strategy. What began as a job had grown into a purpose. Under her, the company launched fair labor programs, mentorships, and alliances with local businesses. Across town, the Vega Salazar Center opened, funding education and jobs for struggling youth. At its launch, Javier, now a college freshman, stood beside her, grinning like the kid she'd fed years ago. Kindness, she knew, was the investment that always returned. 2 weeks later, she stood beside Victor at Javier's graduation. The boy beamed from his wheelchair, diploma gripped tightly, a symbol of his resilience. Told you I'd make it, he said, his voice brimming with pride. Marisol laughed, tousling his hair. Never doubted you, pequeño. Victor watched, his typically stoic facade softened by the moment. "You did good, Vega," he said, his tone quieter than usual. She smirked. "Damn right I did." Javier grinned up at them. "Are you two gonna hug or something?" Victor sighed. "Not a chance." She rolled her eyes. "No way." Javier's laughter cut through the air, a sound of pure joy. In that moment, Marisol felt the weight of her journey settle, not as a burden, but as a quiet strength. What began with a simple sandwich on a rainy night had rippled outward, touching lives she'd never imagined. She'd faced down doubt, betrayal, and a world that rarely made space for her, turning kindness into a force that couldn't be ignored. But kindness, she knew, wasn't a solo act. It grew through connection, through the hands that reached back. 2 weeks later, she stood with Victor at Javier's graduation. The boy beamed from his wheelchair, diploma in hand like a treasure. "Told you I'd do it," he said, chest out. She laughed, tousling his hair. "Never doubted you." Victor watched, his usual reserve softened. "You did well, Vega," he said. She smirked. "Damn right I did." Javier grinned. "Are you two gonna hug?" Victor sighed. "No." She rolled her eyes. "Never!" Javier laughed. For once, Marisol felt she'd built something lasting, and she wasn't finished. Years later, Marisol Vega sat in Salazar Enterprises' executive suite, her name etched on the door as Vice President of Strategy. What began as a job had grown into a purpose. Under her, the company launched fair labor programs, mentorships, and alliances with local businesses. Across town, the Vega Salazar Center opened, funding education and jobs for struggling youth. At its launch, Javier, now a college freshman, stood beside her, grinning like the kid she'd fed years ago. Kindness, she knew, was the investment that always returned. 2 weeks later, she stood beside Victor at Javier's graduation. The boy beamed from his wheelchair, diploma gripped tightly, a symbol of his resilience. "Told you I'd make it," he said, his voice brimming with pride. Marisol laughed, tousling his hair. "Never doubted you, pequeño." Victor watched, his typically stoic facade softened by the moment. "You did good, Vega," he said, his tone quieter than usual. She smirked. "Damn right I did." Javier grinned up at them. "Are you two gonna hug or something?" Victor sighed. "Not a chance." She rolled her eyes. "No way." Javier's laughter cut through the air, a sound of pure joy. In that moment, Marisol felt the weight of her journey settle, not as a burden, but as a quiet strength. What began with a simple sandwich on a rainy night had rippled outward, touching lives she'd never imagined. She'd faced down doubt, betrayal, and a world that rarely made space for her, turning kindness into a force that couldn't be ignored. But kindness, she knew, wasn't a solo act. It grew through connection, through the hands that reached back. Months later, Marisol launched Tales of Kindness, a quiet initiative born from that night at the cafe. It wasn't a grand corporate project or a flashy campaign, just a small platform where people could share stories of compassion, from a meal offered to a stranger to a hand extended in the dark. She funded it herself, carving it out of her salary at Salazar Enterprises, where she'd risen to a role she'd forged through grit and vision. Javier, now a budding writer, posted the first tale, a boy in a wheelchair, a server who cared, and a father who learned to see. The stories poured in, a mechanic fixing a single mom's car for free, a teacher staying late to help a struggling kid, a nurse sitting with a patient who had no one else. Each one was a thread, weaving a tapestry of goodness across Charlotte's streets and beyond. Marisol read them late at night in her modest apartment, the same one she'd kept despite her new income, because roots mattered more than riches. Victor, ever the skeptic, donated silently, never admitting it until Javier let it slip with a grin. One evening, Marisol sat with Javier at the cafe where it all began, now a community hub thanks to her quiet insistence. The neon sign still flickered, but the tables buzzed with people, some sharing stories, others just listening. Javier scrolled through the Tales of Kindness site on his phone, now a growing archive of hope. "Look at this," he said, showing her a new post. A girl inspired by Marisol's story had bought coffee for a homeless man, sparking a chain of small gifts down her block. Marisol smiled, her chest warm. "That's how it works," she said. "One spark lights a fire." Victor joined them, sliding into the booth with a rare ease. "You've built something," he said, his voice gruff but honest. "More than I ever did." She met his gaze. "We built it. All of us." Javier nodded, then laughed. "Yeah, but you started it." The rain tapped the window, a soft echo of that first night, and Marisol realized kindness wasn't just a moment, it was a movement. So here's your invitation. Join us in Tales of Kindness. Share your story, big or small, in the comments below, because every act matters. Like this tale, if it moved you, pass it along to someone who needs it, and subscribe to catch more sparks that light the dark. Together we'll keep the fire burning, one kindness at a time.